So to start things off, if you could give a brief introduction about yourself.
My name is David Womack. I am a junior at Georgia College.
Hi, my name is Priya Hemphill. I go to Georgia College and State University, and I'm a theater major and dance minor.
Hi, my name is Kaylee Jade Warfield. I am from Alpharetta, Georgia, and I went to Georgia College and State University in Milledgeville, where I graduated in 2019 with a theater and creative writing degree.
Is Cedric Norris Jr. I graduated in May of 2019 with a double bachelor's degree in philosophy and liberal studies.
So if someone had never heard of Black Lives Matter before, how would you describe that to them?
To me, whenever someone says Black Lives Matter, or whenever I say it, I think of it as like, I'm not saying that other lives don't matter.
Okay, Black Lives Matter is basically, it's an equality movement. It's basically saying that historically in our country, Black lives have not been treated as equal to most like other races.
The phrase is rather new, but the meaning behind it is not new at all. It's actually something that Black people have been fighting for their whole lives, which is ultimately freedom and race equality and Black liberation.
Black Lives Matters is a movement that brings attention to the disparities and the unfair treatment to Black lives.
What would you say is happening with the movement right now?
A lot of the current media coverage has started with the death of George Floyd and how he was unlawfully killed by a police officer during his arrest.
Happening with Black Lives Matters right now is that people are banding together. You know, they are gathering with these peaceful protests. They are gathering at town hall meetings. They are, gathering, in their homes, having important conversations about why we need to continue this fight for equality. We now have seen that we have had the largest civil rights movement to date, and that's in large part due to the Black Lives Matters movement.
A lot of people are surprised with what's happening in our world and what's happening on the streets all over the country, but not all over the country, not just all over the country, all over the entire world.
So now there are a lot of protests and petitions and a lot of like, there's just a lot of movement and I guess call to action for the people in charge and like the government to make like real, like solid changes to the way that the system works so that nothing like this ever happens again.
The death of George Floyd erupted all over social media, all over news outlets because people were outraged. And by doing so, then hashtags of Black Lives Matter or Justice for George Floyd started becoming a trend. And with that, the protests began. So there have been protests almost every single day since his death.
And it's really kind of pushed people knee deep into this reflection to question their own privilege and their own prejudice. And so the Black Lives Matters movement is a movement that's so powerful in that regard because it makes people think about who am I and how does my privilege contribute to my experience as an American.
So there is a lot going on. What kind of progress do you want this movement to bring about? Like, what kind of changes do you want to be able to see in our countries, in our communities through the success of this movement?
I think the changes that the Black Lives Matters movement is really anticipating to make is, just bringing this conversation to a larger platform. Really kind of calling out the unfair treatment of Black men and women, whether it be through police brutality, whether it be through the educational system, whether it be through, mortgage lending and banks, or through healthcare. Black Lives Matter's main goal is to bring a heightened awareness to how Black people are not treated fairly in this country.
I'm hoping to see true change. Like, not a change when you just change the verbiage in a document. Like, I'm not looking for change within the Declaration of Independence. I'm looking for a new declaration, honestly. We have to reset the entire system. We have to dismantle it. We have to break it down. We have to break down the structures that have been put in place to keep Black people at a disadvantage all the time.
Some changes that I want to see is definitely the defunding of the police. The police gets way too much money, I think, and not that money isn't really being reflected in like their training. Like, the police get so much money that it seems like they should know more, but it's like, and act better, but they're not really. And that money should go to other parts of the government, like education, healthcare, those kinds of things.
We need people to stop being ignorant to the way the United States is.
We have to show up and speak up and get out and go to our local government. We have to vote. We have to pay attention. We have to educate ourselves. And that is how we are going to get true change. Because ultimately, it's going to take at least 100 years for us to really see like that significant new world that we want, our new country. If we as American people want to see true equality amongst race, gender, and class, we have to break down the structure that's been placed by the founders of this country. And we have to write a new one. We have to write new rules.
People who say, I'm not trying to like call in bad, but like people who say all lives matter was directly created to combat the Black Lives Matter movement. It's to basically say that you say Black Lives Matter, we say all lives matter. But like in the United States, all lives really doesn't matter. Because if you're a minority, you are essentially, you are not treated the same way as a white person is.
So a common term that's thrown around is all lives matter. And if you could touch on the difference between what Black Lives Matter means and what all lives matter means, and why one of those is much more uninformed than the other.
The term all lives matter is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. It is the truest form of ignorance, honestly. Because people get confused when Black people or anybody says, hey, Black Lives Matter. People, usually white people, they get confused. They're like, well, what about us? What about us? We matter too. In fact, all lives matter. All lives, they matter. Yeah, I never your life didn't matter. In fact, I can't say that because your life does matter because you're not dying at the hands of a police officer who can kill you for no reason and then get away with it. So no, I'm not saying that your life doesn't matter. I'm just saying that Black lives matter also, that they too matter.
All lives matters is a problematic statement and is an ignorant statement only because all lives can't matter if Black lives don't matter. And that's the reason why we have this movement, is because we see this large disparity in how Black people are treated. Ahmaud Arbery, Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, the list goes on and on. George Floyd, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin. These are examples that we've seen where Black people have been specifically targeted based off stereotypes, generalizations, assumptions, just based off the color of their skin. And for someone to notate that all lives matters, it completely discounts just how these people have lost their lives to these senseless murders.
Would you mind touching on a story about someone who has been severely affected by police brutality recently?
Ahmaud Arbery was jogging in Glenn County, a county in Georgia, and on that jog, he decided to stop and look at a home, a property that was in development. There were two white men who saw him and assumed that because he was coming from that property that he stole something, and they shot him. They cornered him in the road and they shot him. And as he fought, they continued to shoot. Breonna Taylor was simply sitting at her home, you know, minding her business in the comfort of her own home. And cops walked in on what was a call that they got wrong and shot her in her home. And they have yet to be arrested. And those are just a few of the cases that we see that plague our TV screens and our cell phones and conversations that we have to have that are so uncomfortable, but so necessary.
Now, I know this question might seem a little intrusive, but have you experienced racism and or police brutality yourself?
Yes, I've been pretty privileged to where I'm not that dark. And I grew up in a mainly Black neighborhood and area. I personally didn't see a white person in person until I was 16 years old. So racism didn't directly affect me that often where I lived. It was mostly when I went to visit my family, because my mom's side of the family is it's not entirely mixed, but we do have white family members. And so I would notice that when we would go out in public, specifically with my mother, because both of my parents are Black, but she's lighter than I am, like much lighter than I am. But we would go out in public with myself and my siblings and my cousins who were white, my mom who was Black. And people would look at us as if those white kids shouldn't be with us, because my mother's family is in Ohio, in like rural parts of it, Ohio. So Black kids walking around with little white kids it wasn't normal, and it definitely wasn't, not verbally, but at least like you could tell that they didn't accept that, and that they didn't think that that was right, but no one would come out and say it, because it was a small town and gossip and that kind of thing. No one wanted to be known as the racist, but you could definitely tell that they were racist.
I experienced racism or racial profiling by a police officer back when I was at school in GCSU. My junior year of college, I was at Buffington's, and I was with a few friends. We were in the back of the bar. We were just hanging out outside. And all of a sudden I hear this screaming going on, and it's one of my really good friends, Luke Travis. Beautiful man. I love him. He's my life. He's screaming back and forth with this local Milledgeville person. And this person, this woman, decided to call him the F word, a discriminatory word that is used against gay people, against anybody within the LGBTQ community, specifically gay people. But so he's going back and forth with her. Obviously, he's getting very upset. I'm getting upset watching it. My two other friends that I was talking to is Harley Pope and Abby Knox, all theater majors. they are also watching this happen. Everybody's getting upset. So we step in to kind of bring Luke back and to, you know, like protect him. It was a very maternal instinct. And so as this is happening, then it turns into just like a screaming fight where me and the other people that I'm with are yelling back to this Milledgeville local person. And so all of a sudden, I guess there were police officers in the parking lot next door. They heard what was going on. They walked over and they came over to us and they asked us what was happening. Luke at that time had walked away. He had gone somewhere else because he was really upset. So he wasn't involved in this last part. But I was standing with Abby and I was standing with Harley. And we are talking to these police officers. Now, what happens is that when I'm dealing with a police officer, I am automatically very nervous. Like, I'm scared. My breathing starts to become rapid, and I get really hot and fuzzy, and my heart starts to race. So I get incredibly anxious when I'm around a police officer. However, because of that, I am very careful as to what I say or how I answer, and I'm also very careful that I don't say too much. I only answer the questions that I need to. So this police officer is asking us questions. It's two of them. And these police officers are asking us what's happening or what just happened. We explained to them what was happening. And then this one particular police officer, who was a male, and his partner was a female. This one particular officer was closest to me. I was on the outside of the group. And I'm just kind of standing there being quiet as Harley and Abby are answering these police officers. And so he asked for my ID. I gave him my ID. And he was like, "Why are you being quiet?" And I'm like, "I'm not, sir. I'm just, you know, I'm not trying to be quiet. I'm just there talking right now. So I didn't want to say anything out of line." And he was like, "Well, you need to be talking. You need to speak up." So all of a sudden, I start to get agitated and I start to get emotional because I'm scared, and he's coming on to me like really strong out of nowhere. It was very, very strange because I felt like he was coming after me, that he was trying to get me riled up, that he was trying to upset me. And it got to a point of where he's kind of like yelling in my face, trying to get me to answer or trying to get me to talk back to him and talk at him. And there comes a point where he says, "You know, I have my body cam on." And I'm like, "Okay, why do you feel the need to point out you have a body cam on? We're not doing anything." And so Harley steps up and she's like, "Sir, can you please calm down? We're not doing anything. We are all of age. We're not hammered out here. We're just having a good time at this bar." And so his partner actually ends up pulling him back and telling him to calm down. The partner says, "You guys can go home. You're free to go home." So as we start walking, Harley, I was so upset that I actually started crying, just because it got really intense really fast, and I didn't really understand what was happening, and I was just confused. Like I did not get it. It was a lot to process in that moment. So as we're walking away, Harley yells back something saying, "You made a huge mistake," to the police officers. Harley is a white woman. So is Abby Knox. And so is Luke Travis, except he's a white male. Harley yells that back to the police officer, and then I yell back, "You made a huge, fat mistake." Apparently, the police officer thought that I called him fat, which I absolutely did not. And then all of a sudden, he says, "That's it." And he charges me, and he arrests me. And I was charged for public intoxication, which is ridiculous because they didn't even breathalyze me. And so all I really had to do was pay a fine. But I was the only one who got arrested. So what do you call that? What does that look like to you? because what it looks like to me is racial profiling. And especially in Milledgeville, I could absolutely see that happening. So yeah, that was the most recent one that's happened. I mean, there's plenty of other scenarios that have happened when I was younger, but that was the most recent one, and that is obviously one where I was in close contact with a police officer. I mean, I was arrested, and I was arrested for public intoxication while I was of age, and I wasn't even breathalyzed. Oh yeah, I'm also a woman of color. I'm a Black woman, and my friend who I was with is a white woman, and she wasn't arrested. So what does that look like? So I get arrested. They discharge me. The manager at Buffington's, he bailed me out because I worked for Buffington. So he was like, that's my girl. I'm going to take care of her. They usually do that for all Buffington's people. But they bailed me out. When I went home, and I actually lived with Harley at the time. When I went home to her, it was late. It was probably like 4 or 5 a.m. I ran straight into her arms, and we both started crying. And she told me that she has never seen anything like that. And she had no idea until that exact moment what this world is and where my placement as a person of color in this world, what that looks like and how I'm treated unfairly. She said that that is when it all became so real to her that she will never not fight for a person of color ever again. Because, I mean, in that moment, she tried to be my ally, but she didn't know how. So now it's a matter of, you know, she educated herself, so now she knows what to do. But in those situations, you know, when you see something like that and you're not a person of color, when you're, you know, just, and like I said, when you're a non-person of color and you know that something is going wrong, you can feel it. I mean, vibes do not lie. Energy does not lie. You can tell when something is tense or unfair or just something is rubbing you the wrong way. You know these things. When you know those things, act on them, trust your instincts, but do so obviously in the safest way possible. Luckily, I wasn't harmed in that sort. I mean, like when I was arrested, it was really aggressive, but I was not harmed. I'm still alive by the grace of God, but at the same time, that was a really scary experience, and I'll never forget it. And I know that she will also never forget it. Abby will never forget it. Luke will never forget it. And everybody who was outside when that happened will never forget it, ever.
I remember it was a December night, and I was driving back from Atlanta. My friends and I had went to Atlantic Station to see a show that they were doing on ice in Atlantic Station in Atlanta, Georgia. And we were driving back home to Milledgeville that same night. So I dropped my friends off, and I was on the street where my apartment complex was. And as I was driving on the street, I was speeding. I was going 10 miles over the speed limit. And the cop stopped me, and he asked me if I knew the speed limit on the road. I expressed to the cop that I did not. And that was my first time ever, you know, I expressed to the cop that I did not know the speed limit on that road, and that I had never noticed the speed limit sign, because this was this particular way that I was taking was a way that I had never took before. And he said to me, "How do you not know the speed limit on the road that you live on?" And I was like, "Sir, I understand how crazy it sounds, but you know, I've never seen that sign before. It must be something that's new. They must have just put it up." And I was driving, and he looked in my car, and he was, and there was a plastic wrapper that was sitting in my cup holder, and he said, "What's in that plastic wrapper?" He was like, have you been doing drugs? And I was like, no, sir. And I pulled the plastic wrapper out and I gave it to him. And I said, sir, fudge was in that plastic wrapper because we had gotten fudge at the ice show. And so that's just one of the many times that I experienced it with a cop, where I felt that he assumed because of the color of my skin that I had been doing drugs or that I was under the influence. Another time that I experienced racism was in high school. And I went to a small high school in a small town in rural Georgia. And oftentimes I was one of 2 or 3 Black males in my classes because I took gifted courses, and those classes always seemed to be predominantly white. Well, in calculus, one student one day decided to look at me and tell me that I was not a nigger, I was a good Black. And niggers and good Blacks are not the same. And I then proceeded to kind of yell at him and go towards him aggressively. And I was later sent to detention. And he was just given silent lunch. But that was one of the first times that I actually realized that this level of ignorance still existed and it was still accepted. Because why would someone say something like that if, number one, they have never heard it in their environment before, but number two, if it was never accepted in their environment?
So what can a GC student do? Like, what can the average person do to help forward the Black Lives Matter cause?
The way that I could say right now is to just kind of like be socially woke and like understand what's going on and be able to tell somebody the correct information. And like you have to stop ignorance when you see it, because if you don't, they're going to just keep doing it. Like if your friend says something and you know it's wrong and it's directly related to like the Black Lives Matter movement or the George Floyd death or anything like that, it's up to you to stop them in that instance.
What a GCSU student or a GCSU faculty member or just a regular person can do if they want to help is that you can listen to your Black friends and people in your life who are people of color. Listen to them because they're begging you to hear them. Listen to them. Ask them questions, but generously ask them questions. And when I say generously, what I mean is be kind when you're asking these questions. When you are curious, make sure you are being generous enough to understand and actually like swallow the information they're giving you rather than just giving them a rebuttal. Listen to them and sit with the information, sit with those feelings, because chances are is that a person of color, when you do ask them these questions, it can be an emotional experience. Sometimes when Black people answer questions, what it feels like is that we are having to fight for our validity, that we are having to argue for the fact that our history, that the degradation of Black people, that the systemic disadvantage that's in place within America is not real. We are having to fight and argue that our experiences are not real. So be kind when you're asking these questions, and I promise you, that person of color will be kind back and be willing to teach you, be willing to educate you. So things that you can actually do to help: you can be an ally, you can be a advocate for Black Lives Matter, you can donate towards Black Lives Matter foundations or Justice for foundations, or Black women foundations, or LGBTQ Black Lives foundations. There are so many foundations that you can donate to, or you can volunteer to be a part of, or you can hold people's hands and arms as you guys march and protest, or you can make sure that you are an escort for your Black friends, Black counterparts, meaning that if they are dealing with something, if they feel like that they're having a disadvantaged situation, if they feel like they are disadvantaged in a situation, fight for them. Fight for them. Be that ally. Help us. Step up for us. Fight for us. That's what you can do.
Regular GC student, what I recommend them doing is reaching out to their friends, to their counterparts, to their classmates, and not coming from a place of ignorance, but really just asking those important questions, doing your research, seeing why this is such an important issue, signing petitions, getting involved in the local Milledgeville community, because you guys are a part of that community. You do have a place there. And really just being involved in those organizations on campus, such as the Black Student Alliance, such as the Cultural Center, such as the Hub, the Honoring Uniting building that we have on campus, and really just digging knee deep into those experiences with those individuals who occupy those spaces, because that's where you can really learn, and that's where you can really navigate a conversation. I know that Georgia College is considered to be a predominantly white institution, and I know that the white population is the greater population of that institution. But something that I find very valuable about Georgia College is that there is a space to explore the importance of diversity and inclusivity. And I think if students took more time to just look around in their surroundings and really kind of soak in the experiences and really actively listen to people that live in the community of Milledgeville and to their Black and brown counterparts that occupy spaces on campus, it can really be a productive move forward. And it can be something that's contributing to moving us forward, as a generation.
Okay, to bring this to a close here, do you have any last remarks or statements that you would like to share with the GC community?
So, fighting for racial equality and also fighting for the racial injustices that we do see based off of police brutality, as well as within the class system and the health system, and generally just within America. I have always been very passionate about fighting for that equality and finding equality, and how do we get there? How do we actually get to a point of leveling up and dismantling the system that's here now? How do we get to forming a newer system, a better system, a kinder system? So I've always been passionate as far as searching for that and fighting for it and using my voice to do so, whether it's through art or really whether it's just through having these conversations. Me as an artist, me as a theater major, and as a writer, it's definitely my duty to use my voice and my experiences to shed light on these injustices that happen within a person of color's life. And I obviously enjoy doing that because it is so exhilarating and liberating for me to tell my truth, to speak my truth. This movement, having conversations, joining the revolution, joining the cause, being an ally, that's what all of this is about. So, obviously you're taking the right step in the direction, by watching this video. So keep on doing it, you know, keep on pushing through, because you're more than capable, and this world, this country is more than capable of finding that peace, that freedom and true level of equality that everybody wants and hopes for. So it's all possible. It will take time, but you know, patience is key. And yeah, that's all I got to say.
I guess just like overall, just knowing that Black Lives Matter is an equality movement. It's not saying that anyone else's life doesn't matter. It's just saying that right now, Black lives are not being treated the same as everyone else, and that it's very important for all lives to matter. Black lives need to matter as well. And living your everyday life, just be aware of the fact that Black people have a different experience than most people, and not to contribute to that experience. Just if you see an injustice, speak out against it. No matter what your race is, it's always helpful to not be racist and to help others. And that's basically like what Black Lives Matter stands for. It's everyone is equal. We all are treated the same.
I would have to say that I told my mom the other day that this was like, we were gonna have protests and we were gonna have riots, because eventually it was gonna get to a point to where we needed to start speaking out, because of the fact that it took us this long to do it. Says something, because even if it doesn't stop now, this isn't gonna die down. I'm not gonna say we need our government to like step up, but we need our government to actually want to help us change, because they have all the power. We can protest all we want to. The government has to make something happen. It's the same thing with gay rights. They were protesting for literally years, and then they finally got what they wanted. And then even after they got what they wanted, they still would get discriminated on. But we have to just keep peacefully protesting, because eventually we will get results. It's just a matter of time.
I think it's important to know that your Black brothers and sisters right now are having a hard time, and now is the time to step up and be the ally. Now is the time to speak up at Thanksgiving dinner and hold someone accountable. Now is the time to really, really make a difference, and to educate yourself on why that difference is so important. Because it can make a big change. Black people deserve equality. Through Jim Crow laws, through slavery, through all of these years of discrimination and racism, we've persevered and we've done the best that we know how. And now I think it's finally time. It's been time for the world to match us with that energy and really give us the respect and the equality and the fairness that we deserve. And that starts with us. That starts with our generation having uncomfortable conversations. That starts with us loving each other, understanding, actively listening, educating ourselves, voting. We have to be the change we want to see.